Hey everybody, Josh Sigurdson of World Alternative Media here, and Trump is making nuclear threats against Russia again. We've recently reported on claims that he, on audio tape, said that he was going to bomb Moscow back in 2024 while he was still running, and of course, the recent claims that he asked Zelenskyy how much would it take in order to strike Moscow. Again, totally crazy things to say, but of course, the peace president is piecing again, as I wrote on X, as he's now talking about sending nuclear submarines outside of Russia in response to things that Dmitry Medvedev said, the former president of Russia, saying that these recent ultimatums are pushing the country closer to war. I think that that is a no-brainer, that statement. But of course, this led to Trump saying that this is in some way a threat, even though he's the one that's arming and funding Ukraine, which he ran against. And so now we are watching this situation get closer to a precipice, unfortunately, as there's many other stories that are coming out at the same time with this ultimatum and this deal to so-called end the Ukraine war. I would love to see it, obviously, but there is a manufacturer crisis that continues to happen regardless. And of course, this is happening simultaneously as we see these claims that Canada will lose their trade deal with the U.S. for supporting Palestine as we see a further encroachment into the annexation of Gaza. Things are continuing to get crazier, my friends. It doesn't mean that we're without solutions. So we're going to go into this story, a lot of other stories, and more today. But before we do, I urge people to check those links below. Check out heavensharvest.com for long-term storable foods that are non-GMO. There's organic kits, heirloom seeds, water filtration and storage, and books on how to get started. There's also freeze-dried food, of course. Use code WAM, W-A-M, and you will get 5% off as well as free shipping on these items. I highly recommend people get prepared. In the face of war, the utilization of war to bring in food rations on digital IDs is very, very much a real issue going forward. And we need to be prepared for that so we aren't dependent on them, so that we have real solutions, my friends. Also, make sure to check out whambeef.com for 10 plus year shelf life freeze-dried steak, 12 servings per bag. There's freeze-dried chicken and ground beef as well. I urge people to go and check that out. Use code WAMBEEF, WAMBEEF, all one word, and you will get 20% off on your order. This is guaranteed non-mRNA, no lab-grown meat, all-American beef that's 100% natural. Check that out in the description of the video. There's so many options going forward. It's crazy to not take any of them seriously going forward. We need to be prepared. So check that out below. Hit that like button and all that. Let's get into this. So this is from Pete Hegseth on X. He wrote, he shared rather, Donald Trump's post on Truth Social. He said, based on the highly provocative statements of the former president of Russia, Dmitry Medvedev, who is now the deputy chairman of the Security Council of the Russian Federation, I have ordered two nuclear submarines to be positioned in the appropriate regions, just in case these foolish and inflammatory statements are more than just that. Words are very important and can often lead to unintended consequences. I hope this will not be one of those instances. Thank you for your attention to this matter. Now, he's one to talk about words. Now, look, this is more of that back and forth rhetoric, and I believe normalization of that shift into overall war. Again, it doesn't matter if it's Trump, if it's Republicans, if it's the Democrats, if it's Biden, Kamala, Obama, Bush, Clinton. The story goes on because these guys are owned by a shadow state, and they're heavily blackmailed, obviously, which has been pretty blatant as of recent, not just with the way they've acted over the last 20 something years, but of course, with this refusal to be honest about the Epstein files, which we've gone into many times before. But this is all in response to a post by Dmitry Medvedev where he said Trump's playing the ultimatum game with Russia, 50 days or 10. He should remember two things. One, Russia isn't Israel or even Iran. Two, each new ultimatum is a threat and a step towards war, not between Russia and Ukraine, but with his own country. Don't go down the Sleepy Joe road. And honestly, and he's referring to Biden, of course, honestly, it goes without saying that these pushes for 10-day deals or 50-day deals or 5 days, and then like what we saw with Iran, he said they have 14 days and then bombed them 2 days later. Again, there's not honesty in it. And of course, there's a clear sign of the promotion of war between Russia and the United States, while Trump at the same time is arming Ukraine, at the same time as he's doing these things that he ran against when it came to Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, at the same time as he is promoting this idea of the European Union and NATO stocking up on massive amounts of American arms, which he says is good for the economy, but actually is a further step towards the military industrial complex's goals of total militarism, where we have now NATO, many countries within NATO conscripting and calling for potential war with Russia. And, we have leaked documents that we've documented in the past from Germany back in January of 2024, where they described how they were going to go to war with Russia by July 2025. Now, obviously, it's August 2025 now. It's never really quite on time, but we know that they had already scripted out a step-by-step basis of how they will end up at war with Russia. And the German government has openly said that they are at war with Russia, and they are calling for strikes on nuclear facilities within Russia. So they've already crossed so many lines. And again, I do believe this is entirely manufactured in the scripted shift between the Western power structures and the Eastern power structures. I think we are shifting into that Eastern bloc right now, and they need the right excuse, the pretext, to make it seem normal, to make it seem natural, which it is not. It has been a plan in the books for many, many decades, my friends. Now, let's get further into what all of this actually means. If my computer loads here, I'm having some problems here. There are so many stories coming out regarding this push for war between the United States and Russia. And part of that is, of course, the overall narrative that this is just an issue between Russia and Ukraine and Russia and NATO and Russia and the United States, when indeed it's actually an economic shift we're witnessing. Nonetheless, antiwar.com reports US tells UN that Trump wants a deal to end Ukraine war by August 8th. Now, that is a nice thought, of course. If it happens, then I will honestly, obviously, applaud and say, great, this is awesome. But let's be realistic here. This is a major, manufactured crisis that we've been talking about for a long time, and we all know how the script ends. But they will, of course, just like they have with the Iran crisis, say there's a ceasefire, say everything's going to be okay, let everyone calm down for a little bit, and then double down later. Unfortunately, this is part of an agenda, so it is not something that I believe is going to end anytime soon. I hope I'm wrong. But I don't think that's what's going to happen. And considering that shift that I was just talking about from the west to the east, China urges U.S. to stop shifting blame over Ukraine conflict. Beijing has denied supporting Russia's military and defended trade with Moscow as legal and balanced. Well, they're definitely helping Russia's military, but that's part of the big bloc, though, of course. China and Russia are the top allies with each other and major allies of Iran. And also, we have to understand that we are looking at the founders of BRICS, the new currency system, which they are coming out with a new currency. They've already premiered the paper version, but I believe it will be digital, and that will be part of that shift into a global technocracy with CBDC, central bank digital currencies, digital IDs, and of course, social credit, carbon credits, and rations of food, and et cetera. But they need the right crisis to do that, of course. They need a crisis, and of course, order out of chaos, as they say. They come in with a replacement system for the system that they themselves help destroy. That goes for the US side of it. That goes for the Russian and Chinese side of it. I think it's all part of the same overall agenda by the shadow state. But of course, we see China denying that they're, supporting Russia's military. Of course they are. Of course they are. But whatever, it's all one big, game of who can throw the stone the furthest on the global stage as far as propaganda goes. RT reports German general urges Ukraine to strike Russian airfields. So I was talking about this earlier. Moscow earlier suggested that Berlin is becoming dangerous again while accusing it of supporting the West's militarization. Of course they are. Olaf openly said that he is at war, that Germany is at war with Russia. And this is happening as they are conscripting countless people. As I've reported previously in a past video, Germany plans to recruit 40,000 teens a year. Military goes flexible, fast, and they call it voluntary, yet they do have new instructions in place regarding conscription, which we reported on just about a month and a half ago. Now, Zelenskyy is demanding regime change in Russia. He's getting propped up by Trump right now after all that theater that we saw of them saying, or like Trump arguing and JD Vance arguing with Zelenskyy at the White House. I said at the time it's theater. It's WWE, but here we are. Now, this is happening at the same time as we see a massive shift regarding Israel and Palestine. I mean, again, it was part of the overall agenda in the first place because Canada joins growing number of Western nations set to recognize Palestinian statehood. Now, keep in mind, Israel was the one that employed via Mossad Jeffrey Epstein. We know that from court documents. We know that from the fact that he bragged about it himself and was clearly a blackmail agent. And of course, the Trump administration is helping to cover this up right now, like the past administrations, and then claiming Obama created some Epstein hoax. I've been talking about this since 2009. I'm pretty sure they weren't using Epstein as a hoax against Trump in 2009. Not to mention, the first trials came about under Bush. So whatever. Point is, it's nonsense. But this idea that all these countries are heavily blackmailed by Israel are going to suddenly shift support away from Israel and into Palestine is nonsense. Trudeau called himself a Zionist just about a year ago, saying that he is a Zionist. Of course, this idea is that, now Canada and France and all these countries are suddenly supporting Palestine, and they don't like what Israel's doing over there, and they need aid over there. It's nonsense because they waited until the place was absolutely devastated, that almost 100,000 people were killed, mostly children, as they have absolutely devastated the region. Then they can pretend that they always were against it, and it's too little too late as aid is being restricted. Meanwhile, Canada secretly fast-tracked arms to Israel despite public pledge to halt exports, report reveals. So Canada giving these arms to Israel while pretending and virtue signaling, claiming that they are supportive of Palestinian statehood is complete nonsense, as we see a total annexation of the region. But this is interesting because even Matt Walsh, who is a big time Trump supporter and generally a pretty big Israel supporter, is calling this out because Trump wrote on Truth Social, wow, Canada has just announced that it is backing statehood for Palestine. That will make it very hard for us to make a trade deal with them. Oh, Canada. I mean, as Matt Walsh wrote on X, this is ridiculous. If a trade deal with Canada is beneficial to the American people, then it should go forward, regardless of Canada's stance on Palestine. The benefit of the American people should be the guiding principle here. Yes, but Matt, it's as we've seen, it's always Israel first. It's make Israel great again. This is the agenda of the Trump administration as they go for full annexation. Trump put $1 trillion into the military budget, the largest military budget in U.S. history. Weird for the peace president, weird for the guy who wants to cut spending, and then gave it to a foreign country, generally Israel, in order to annex Palestine and go to war with Iran. So again, this is another example of the fact that when you vote, you're sitting on your hands, because it's, again, just a further perpetuation of the agenda that was written long ago. So this annexation, Netanyahu is drafting a plan for the annexation of Gaza as we speak. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has drafted a new plan to annex Gaza and seize the land from Palestine. Thanks to the ongoing war, much of Gaza is uninhabitable and large proportions of its population have been displaced. And of course, this leads to mass migration as well. So enjoy that. Netanyahu has often bragged about sending massive amounts of migrants to the West. But of course, the people that call themselves conservatives will bow to this country, who is a huge manufacturer of gender reassignment drugs for children, is also the employer of Epstein, has one of the largest populations of pedophiles in the world that are housed there extradition free from countries around the world. Of course, it has been a major part of funding and arming these countries around the region that lead to this all-out war that we're witnessing today. And this also includes things like what we see with Russia and Ukraine. It's insane. Now, they're perpetuating the issue with Iran right now. Iran deporting millions of Afghan migrants after capturing alleged Israeli spies. as they're saying massive amounts of Israeli spies are funneling into the country. And it's interesting, through Afghanistan, because, my friends, who runs Afghanistan right now? I'll give you a hint. It starts with a T, ends with an N. The U.S. and the Israeli government created this militia group, this militant group, long ago, called the Taliban. And of course, after the U.S. manufactured this pullout of Afghanistan that led to the uprising of the Taliban in the region, which was armed and funded by the Mujahideen as well, to Al-Qaeda, Taliban, Muslim Brotherhood, ISIS, all these other groups over time. They fabricate this, they manufacture it, it causes chaos, and then they have Israeli spies coming out of Afghanistan into Iran. Now, why are there so many Israeli spies coming out of Afghanistan into Iran? Well, because the groups that were planted there, the Wahhabi factions, are indeed manufactured by Mossad and the CIA and Britain and MI6. And so, look, this has been always the obvious answer to what we're actually witnessing in the Middle East. They say, oh, Israel is protecting the Middle East, but okay, who created the conflict in the first place? Who is planting Wahhabi factions everywhere? What we're seeing in Syria is very similar, where we see HTS, formerly Al-Nusra Front, which is heavily armed and funded by Israel, who is super pro-Israel and super anti-Palestine, which is strange for a bunch of Wahhabi Islamists, taking over the region, overthrowing Assad, which the CIA documents, which I reported on years ago, back like 8 years ago, as I reported at the time, the CIA documents from the 80s that said, they were called Bringing Arms to Bear in Syria, talked about overthrowing Assad Sr. at the time and bringing in militants from Iraq, Lebanon, and Syria to overthrow the Assad government and prop up a new pro-Israeli state, which will go after Alawites, Sunnis, and Christians, which is exactly what we're witnessing today. So this was predicted a long time ago. I shouldn't even say predicted. This was scripted a long time ago. So we're seeing that in Syria. We're now seeing these Afghan migrants in Iran being exposed as Israeli spies. And it's kind of interesting because, again, both of those places were taken over by militia groups that Israel armed and funded in the first place. So what does that tell you? Oh, well, we need to go after all these countries because of all the wars they're causing and all that kind of stuff. And we're the only ally of the U.S. in the region, says Israel. We're trying to help and save the Middle East. Meanwhile, they're literally the ones that are propping up these regimes, propping up these militant organizations in the region that made it unsafe in the first place so that they could justify coming in and solving the problem. Problem, reaction, solution, repeat, the Hegelian dialectic forever. And let's just ignore the Nakba in 1948. Let's just ignore the 70 plus years of mayhem that Israel has caused in that region and then pretend that they are there to save the day from the problems they created in the first place. And now we're also witnessing this via Iran, and that Iran situation connects to Russia and Ukraine and, of course, China, because Russia and China are the top allies of Iran. And of course, with the Ukraine conflict, there's arms being funneled in through there from Israel, while there are Iranian arms being said to be sent over to Russia, as well as North Korean, as well as Chinese, and as well as evidence that Pakistan is getting involved in this as well, while they're at war with India, while we're seeing what's happening between Thailand and Cambodia, while we're witnessing what's happening between China and Taiwan, while we're witnessing all these conflicts at the exact same time. Let's not forget about Lebanon and Yemen. And of course, this overall shift towards AI governance and AI militarism, which Trump just signed on with the Saudis at the same time as he's going after Mexico with military power. This is not what you would call the peace president. And if it is, then we are living in George Orwell's 1984 and we are dealing with doublethink. Let's be real. The solution to these problems is not the state. It's not the government. It's not Trump. It's not Republicans. It's not Democrats. It's not liberals. It's not conservatives. It's you as an individual. And that has always been the case. But of course, we've been made dependent, made weak, made poor, made defenseless by the state that has been so convenient and given us so many convenient things, because tyranny comes under the guise of convenience, and that's how they put us on our knees. And that's why we need to be prepared. That's why we need to not depend on grocery stores, banks. That's why we need to not depend on the state to save us from the problems they created in the first place. So again, I'm going to end this, as always, with the real world solutions. People don't like it. I make basically no money off of it, but I'm going to continue to talk about it because I believe that it is life-saving overall. I think obviously being prepared and not being dependent on food rations down the line, that's a good thing. So I urge people to check out heavensharvest.com for long-term storable foods that are non-GMO. There's organic kits, heirloom seeds, water filtration and storage, and books on how to get started. Use code WAM, W-A-M, and you'll get 5% off as well as free shipping on these items. Again, that's in the United States. I would do it in other countries, but because of shipping rules and laws in European countries, for example, I'm not able to. And I wish I could, but it's up to people over there to push back against those restrictions. But those restrictions are getting worse because they want people dependent. That's why if you're in the United States, it's time to jump on this today before those same restrictions come in with the emergency orders, which they've been planning. So do this for yourself, for your family. Save yourself going forward. Heavensharvest.com, code WAM, W-A-M. Of course, we have whambeef.com for 10 plus year shelf life, freeze-dried steak, 12 servings per bag. There's freeze-dried chicken and ground beef as well. Again, use code WAMBEEF, W-A-M-B-E-E-F, all one word, and you'll get 20% off on your order. So I highly recommend people get on this today and get prepared, my friends. Guaranteed no mRNA, no lab grown meat, all American beef. That's all natural. This is your opportunity to stock up today. Also, of course, we have many, many other options. I want to throw in this one. This is a new one. It's vni.life/WAM, W-A-M. This is really cool stuff. If you use code WAM15, W-A-M 15, 1-5, you will get 15% off on your order. I highly recommend people check out this Rotovite thing. They're making us unhealthy. This is an option, 100 plus vitamins and minerals, phytonutrients, great for cellular health. Amazing stuff when you look at what it does in 5 minutes. You can basically clean your blood out. This is lab tested. Check this out. This is before, and here's 5 minutes later. I mean, it's unbelievable stuff. I highly recommend people check that out. Again, that's vni.life/WAM, and that is code WAM15. As we close this off, I urge people to avoid the CBDC system by checking out firstnationalbullion.com/schedule-consult/ and buy physical gold, silver, platinum, or palladium today. Hold it in your hands, put it in a vault, put it in an IRA outside of the traditional IRA system, and schedule an appointment for a free consultation with Mark Gonzalez and a complimentary investors package. Let him know when you sign up in the comments that you found him at World Alternative Media, or WAM, W-A-M. This is definitely something I recommend people do going forward, so they aren't dependent on that banking system. If you want to help support us, we truly appreciate anything we can get, my friends. We are doing very badly right now, worse than ever before. Every month it's getting worse. We've been bankrupted. We've lost 90% of our income overall since since Trump got in, because we are consistent. We call out every side. We will never stop being honest. We've been offered $1 million to shut up and do what a network tells us to say. And they would script it, and I refuse to do that. And I'd rather sleep on a park bench than take $1 million to lie to people. But with that means that we get bankrupted. So I appreciate any help we can get on Patreon and Subscribestar. You can get for $4.99 a month. You can get exclusive content. Of course, we have gogetfunding.com. We also have X at World Alt Media, where you can also get exclusive content. We have a PayPal address, ancientwonderstelevision@gmail.com. We have a Bitcoin address that you could scan on the screen right here, or check out in the description in text form. We also have a Cointree link with a bunch of different cryptocurrencies that you can donate in, if you please, including privacy coins. And of course, we have our Teespring store with a bunch of merchandise where you can help support us by purchasing that and getting that word out on the street. Anyway, you can find us on Telegram, Band.video, BitChute, Odyssey, Rumble, and Brighteon at World Alternative Media. We're on Hive, Steemit, and Vigilante.tv at Josh Sigurdson. We're on the Bad Guys, TikTok and Instagram, World Alternative Media, Twitter and Getter at World Alt Media, and all the major podcast platforms except for Spotify, where, of course, we're banned. Hit that like button, share on social media, hit the notification bell, and hit subscribe if you have not yet already. And as always, my friends, live freely, live by example. This is Josh Sigurdson signing out from World Alternative Media. Find the truth, be the change.